It was the kind of decision that no one would have thought could topple a world. Yet in a single moment, the fate of the greatest empire in history was sealed. One choice, one misstep, and the mightiest civilization the world had ever known began to crumble forever. There was a time when the world bowed, almost reverently, to the might of this empire. Cities gleamed with marble that seemed to capture the sun itself. Roads stretched like veins through the heart of the known world, and armies moved with a precision and discipline that whispered of invincibility. From the bustling marketplaces to the echoing halls of power, every stone, every coin, every whisper of law spoke of dominance, of order, of an ambition that reached beyond the horizon. The leaders of this empire were not merely rulers. They were architects of destiny. Their vision carved mountains into roads, tamed rivers to nourish fields, and built fortresses that defied time itself. Commerce thrived under their watchful eye. Ideas flowed like rivers between continents, and culture blossomed, leaving a legacy that would endure long after the empire itself began to crumble. Citizens spoke of their rulers with awe. Generals carried banners that told tales of conquest, and the world in every corner recognized their supremacy. It was an age when power was tangible, almost palpable, when the word of an emperor could move nations and the flick of a hand could command loyalty or fear. Every decision made within the marble chambers, every strategy whispered in candlelit war rooms carried weight far beyond its moment. The empire's brilliance was not just in its size or wealth. It was in the unity of its vision, the meticulous orchestration of its might, and the belief that nothing could ever shake its foundation. And yet in the very midst of this grandeur, in the shadow of this brilliance, the seeds of fragility were quietly sown. Hubris, ambition, the subtle misjudgments that are invisible when the world seems to bend to your will. They lingered like shadows at the edge of a candle's glow. For even the tallest towers cast the deepest shadows, and even the strongest walls can hide cracks that will one day split stone from stone. This was the empire at its pinnacle, majestic, unyielding, and eternal in the eyes of its citizens. But history, as it always does, waits patiently for the moment when the mighty forget that even empires are fragile, and that one choice, one act of folly can set into motion the fall of worlds. And then it came, that moment, so deceptively small, yet so monstrously consequential, that would forever alter the course of history. The empire had stood for centuries a testament to discipline, strategy, and vision. Its leaders had faced storms, invasions, betrayals, and internal strife, yet always they endured, and yet, in the quiet chambers of power, amid the flickering candlelight and the rustle of silk robes, a single decision was made. It was a choice that seemed reasonable, even necessary at the time. Perhaps it was driven by ambition, by fear, or by the intoxicating weight of power itself. Perhaps it was made in a moment of hubris, in a fleeting lapse of judgment, when the ruler believed that their will alone could bend destiny. History does not remember the whispered doubts, the sleepless nights, or the counsel of advisors ignored. It only remembers the act. One choice, one command, and the empire's fate was irreversibly set in motion. The decision was a turning of the tide, subtle at first, almost imperceptible. Armies shifted positions, alliances began to strain, and the careful balance that had maintained centuries of prosperity started to wobble. What was once a fortress of certainty became a house of fragile trust, where every move carried unforeseen consequences. Those who were loyal now hesitated. Those who were ambitious began to plot, and the world itself seemed to sense the change in the wind. Greatness, as it turns out, is always walking a knife's edge, and in that instant the empire teetered. Not with the roar of battle, nor with the sound of invading armies, but with the quiet, invisible tremor of a single choice. It is a cruel paradox of history that the most powerful civilizations, the ones that shape the very destiny of mankind, can be undone not by enemies at their gates, but by the frailty of human judgment. The empire had reached its peak, and yet in the echo of that one decision, the first cracks began to appear. The wheels of decline were set in motion, silently, as the world watched, unaware, unsuspecting until it was far too late. The choice had been made, and yet at first it seemed almost harmless. The sun rose and set over the empire as it always had. Markets bustled with life, soldiers marched with precision, and the citizens carried on, unaware that the threads holding their world together had begun to unravel. But history is patient. History waits, watching silently until the first domino falls, and then the rest follow with unstoppable momentum. What began as a single, seemingly isolated decision soon rippled outward, touching every corner of the empire. Governors once loyal began to question commands. Allies who had marched together in triumph now harbored doubts, whispers spreading like wildfire through the marble halls of power. The carefully balanced network of loyalty and fear, of respect and obligation began to tremble. A rebellion here, a betrayal there, and slowly, imperceptibly, the cracks widened. Economies that had thrived for generations faltered. Trade routes once secure became dangerous, and resources that had built monuments and armies alike now grew scarce. The once mighty legions, trained and disciplined, found themselves stretched thin, battling not just external threats, but the invisible erosion of morale and trust. Every decision that had once solidified the empire's strength now became a reminder of its fragility. And yet it was not chaos that struck first, it was subtlety. It was a misaligned strategy, the underestimated enemy, the hesitation of a commander who had once moved with certainty. Each small failure, each overlooked threat, became a link in a chain, and the chain grew heavier, stronger, unrelenting. What had once been an empire of iron and stone, unchallenged and eternal, now became an empire of shadows, its greatness eroding day by day. The terrifying truth is that the fall of greatness is rarely sudden. It is not thunderous. It begins quietly with a single choice, and then gathers momentum like a snowball rolling down a mountain, unstoppable once it reaches a certain point. One misstep, one miscalculation, and suddenly the world that had seemed unshakable is slipping away domino by domino until the inevitable collapse becomes not just possible, but unavoidable. Empires are not built on stone alone. They are not sustained by armies, gold, or laws. They are fragile constructs carried on the shoulders of men and women, their desires, their fears, their pride, and their mistakes. And in the heart of this great empire, human nature was both its engine and its undoing. The ruler who made that fateful choice was not a villain, nor a fool. He was a man, brilliant, ambitious, and burdened by the weight of absolute power. Yet even brilliance cannot escape the pull of hubris. Even ambition cannot outrun doubt. The decisions he made, the counsel he ignored, the warnings he brushed aside, all of it bore the unmistakable fingerprint of humanity, flawed, imperfect, yet profoundly consequential. Around him, advisors whispered warnings that were unheard, generals questioned strategies that were dismissed, and citizens sensed tensions that were invisible to those blinded by power. Pride, arrogance, fear, and desire wove together a tapestry of tension, one thread pulling against another, until the fabric of the empire strained at its seams. Every human choice became a pivot point, every hesitation a crack in the foundation. And therein lies the cruel lesson of history. Empires fall not because they are weak, but because those who wield their power are human. They love, they hate, they dream, they doubt, they misjudge friends and enemies alike. They are as capable of brilliance as they are of fire. The mightiest armies cannot protect a kingdom from the consequences of a single flawed decision made by a man who thought himself untouchable. It is a humbling truth. Greatness, for all its grandeur, is never immune to the limitations of the human heart. And yet, it is precisely that human element, the ambition, the pride, the fear, that gives history its drama, its tragedy, and its unforgettable resonance. For in understanding the humans behind the decisions, we see not just the fall of an empire, but the echo of ourselves in the corridors of power, the choices that shape the world, and the fragility of all we hold dear. And then it was over. Not with a roar, but with a quiet, inexorable unraveling. The empire that had once seemed eternal, whose armies had marched across continents, whose cities had gleamed like jewels under the sun, whose laws and culture had shaped the very world, had crumbled. The monuments remained cold and silent, whispering the stories of glory now gone. The roads, once bustling with commerce and life, lay empty, carrying only the echoes of footsteps long faded. Yet even in destruction there is a story to be told, a lesson carved into the bones of history. The empire's fall was not just the fall of stone and steel. It was the fall of ambition unchecked, of pride untempered, of decisions made without foresight. Its collapse became a mirror, reflecting the fragility of all human endeavors, the impermanence of power, and the inevitability of consequence. Generations would look back and wonder how something so mighty could vanish so completely. Scholars would trace the chain of choices, the misjudgments, the human errors, and the subtle shifts that led to ruin. Poets and philosophers would speak of it in hushed tones, and storytellers would pass down the legend that even the greatest civilization is but a fleeting spark against the darkness of time. And yet in that legacy of destruction there is also a strange beauty. For it reminds us that greatness is never guaranteed, that power is earned and maintained only through vigilance, wisdom, and humility. It teaches that one decision, one moment of pride, one lapse of judgment can ripple through centuries, shaping the fate of nations and leaving an indelible mark on the soul of the world. The empire fell, but its story endured. And in that endurance lies the haunting truth. History does not forgive, nor does it forget. The world remembers the heights of glory, and it remembers the depths of collapse. And through it all, the lesson whispers across the ages that empires are human and humanity is fragile, and that every choice, no matter how small it may seem, carries the weight of eternity.